Hello, lovely, and welcome to the Essence of Expression podcast. Get ready to explore insights, lessons, practices, and wisdom from life for life. I'm your host, Arejay, healer, teacher, student, and sage. I'm excited and honored to have you with me on this journey. Let's dive in. Today, I want to talk to you about reasons to learn the botanical names of plants, especially if you want to work with them in your healing and wellness journey. And so one of the things is, I believe it's really important to know the name of what you're working with. And so I do respect the cultural names, and I understand that, depending upon where you're from and what the beliefs are, you may call a plant by a certain name, and that name carries a certain weight, right? And it may even be considered a sacred name. And I love that. I appreciate that. And when we start to work with communities outside of our own, the botanical names will give us a common language to use that can help everybody work with these powerful allies. So that's why I want to share some of the reasons to learn the botanical names. And one is that I'm going to share the reasons first, and then I'll go into kind of breaking that down a little bit more. So reason one, it eliminates confusion. Reason two, to understand the relationships between the plants themselves. Three is to begin to understand some of the characteristics and properties of the plants. And then four is to make sure that we're getting the correct information whenever we're doing research. So, for eliminating confusion, this is going to happen when we move into working with plants outside of our particular cultures and traditions, right? So, and it also helps because sometimes the common name of a plant will include like 12 different variations of that plant. So now how do I know which plant I'm actually working with? And botanical names don't function like that. Botanical names are very specific. So each of those 12 plants would have 12 different botanical names. So it helps to eliminate confusion in that way. And so one example would be lavender, right? There are various types of lavender that exist. And if I want, let's say, if I'm like, oh, lavender, I want to relax, right? And that's what I want to work with this plant for. I would actually want Lavandula angustifolia, because that is the one that it's calming, it's relaxing, versus Lavandula latifolia, for example, it has more of like a camphor smell, like it smells a little bit more like medicated. And we work with that a lot for like respiratory support, not necessarily for the relaxation aspect, because it is a little bit more intense. So that's just an example of helping to eliminate the confusion. Which plant are we actually speaking of and working with, right? And then we begin to understand some of the relationships between the plants with the botanical names, because you start to see the patterns in the naming that you might miss if you were using just the common name. So for example, if we look at rosemary, if we look at rosemary and we look at sage, you wouldn't necessarily think that they're related. Like, just to hear the names of those two plants, you're like, okay, maybe some of you are like, all right, they're spices in my cabinet. Yes, they are. Rosemary is Salvia rosmarinus, and then sage is Salvia officinalis, right? And so we start to see that, like, oh, these two are linked. And the more you start to look at more plants within like salvia that's begin with the term salvia, you'll begin to see that they tend to be a lot of the culinary herbs, at least in the West, they're used as culinary herbs. They are also tend to be really, really aromatic. So they have a really strong scent to them, right? things like that. And so you'll be able to start picking up on that the more you actually take the time to look at the botanical names and work with the plants and learn more about them. Then understanding some of the physical characteristics, right? Some of the names are really helpful in this because some of the names will directly indicate and tell you things that the plant has. So for instance, any plant that is under trifolium, which is often, it's the family for clovers, but trifolium means 3-leaf. And when you look at those plants, they actually, that's the way that the leaves grow, right? They grow in little bunches of 3. So you'll have the stem and you'll have like a little offshoot and there'll be 3 leaves. And that's the pattern that it grows in. And so that becomes helpful whenever if we begin to wildcraft, and even helpful if you decide like, I'm gonna grow this, and you get seeds, and maybe, let's say someone just gave you seeds. They're like, I have this plant, and you start to see it growing, but now it doesn't have 3 leaves, but it's a trifolium plant. Those seeds may have been mislabeled. That plant may have been misidentified. And so you'll begin to know that even when you are growing, that maybe that's not the right plant. I need to check this out before you use it. And then also if you do begin wildcrafting when you're out in nature, to know that it's part of the plant identification, right? If it doesn't have those 3 leaves, I'm probably not picking the plant that I think I'm picking. And if we do start to do wildcrafting and harvesting in nature, there are some protocols to follow. There are respectful ways to do this. I do encourage, if you are going to start wildcrafting, know what you're doing. Start learning, start going out there. But I really do feel the need to share kind of the concepts of never take the first, never take the last, never take more than half, right? Because we do want these plants to continue. We do want them to flourish. And even though we are so blessed to be able to work with them, they don't exist just for us. And I think it's important to remember that. So I just want to throw that in there. Anyway, back to the reasoning. So the fourth and final reason for taking the time to learn the botanical names is to make sure that you are getting the correct information when you're researching, right? Let's make sure we're talking about the plant that we think we're talking about, and let's make sure I'm getting the right chemical constituents, right? So if you're going to use the plants, and especially if you're going to start working with the essential oils, one of the things would be you'll come across the concept of chemotype. And a chemotype is the same plant and their environment caused a change in the chemical components, in the ratio of chemical components, right? And the quickest way to explain this is if you think of identical twins, at first glance, they're the same, but then you get to know them and they behave differently, and you can spot which one is which by their behavior. And eventually they don't even necessarily look the same anymore to you because of how their behavior registers. But when we're researching plants, it's important to know which plant is being worked with so that we know we're getting the right plant for the right project that we're taking on. So for example, when it comes to thyme, there's a chemotype with linalool, and there's a chemotype of thymol, right? And the linalool is the more gentle version. It's generally considered safe. People with sensitive skin can use it, whereas the thymol chemotype is it's got a stronger, sharper scent to it. It's more potent and it has more caution. You use it more cautiously, and there are more parameters within which you work with it. So I hope that helps. I just wanted to share that. I've been coming across a lot of people that are turning more toward working with plants for their wellness, and I think that's great. And I think there are things that we need to share and make sure they're aware of so that we can do this safely, we can do this respectfully. And I'm really a proponent of, how can you form a relationship with the plants that you're working with? How can you learn more about them? How can we care for them? How can we not be selfish and greedy with them, right? So really learning to work with them in a good way. Thank you for your time and attention. If you enjoyed this episode, follow the show. If someone came to mind while you were listening to this episode, please take a moment to share it with them. If you're interested in joining a community and diving further into these topics, please visit theessenceofexpression.com/community and request to join our community group. Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night or day, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.